any luck in this video, the 4.6 liter supercharged Terminator motor will be going into my 2004 Mercury Marauder. Fingers crossed, let's go. In the last video, we got this thing built up basically from, a short block with heads on it to everything you see here. So a lot of work, but well worth the effort. This thing, in my opinion, looks absolutely incredible. So I think a couple things left and this will be ready to bolt on. We still have to get the alternator fully bolted in, measure for a belt. I ran into a snag with the Marauder oil adapter. Will not allow the Terminator style alternator to work, so I think we're gonna have to use the Cobra oil cooler, which is not a big deal. But with that, then this thing is completely done. So might knock out a couple of those things right now, and then I would love to get this thing up in the air on the lift. If you guys have been following the series, you know that I bought this car sight unseen from Louisiana, obviously not running, no motor in it. I'd like to get it up in the air, take a look at the underside, and as I mentioned in the last video, my plan is to mate the motor and transmission together and then hopefully stab them in as one, which may require removal of the front bumper. We'll see. But either way, I'd love to see what the underside of this thing looks like. It's a Louisiana car, so it should be very clean, but let's get under there, see what the exhaust looks like, floor pans, see what we got to do to get the transmission out, and we'll just go from there. So let's get to work. All right, 4,200 pounds of Detroit steel in the air. I wish it was a little farther in there. You guys know the deal. I got low ceilings here, so the lift can't go up all that high, especially with a car that's kind of big like this. But as Mike Tyson would say, now Kith, just get in there. All right, let's take a look under this thing. I cheated. I went under here without you guys, but nothing that we didn't already expect with a Louisiana car, like I said. It's a shame we're gonna have to cut that frame rail because she is mint-y. But, I mean, this thing is clean. Super clean. Look at the floors. Original primer, all still there. I have been looking at this exhaust. My original plan was to try and make this work, but the more I look at it, the more I think most of it is going to be going in the garbage. It's got, this has got to be an aftermarket X-pipe of some sort that they welded to what would be the factory cats and like downpipes, if you will, right there. You can see by the AutoZone coupler on each side. Then they came back here and did something else. These look like knockoff, maybe they're real Flowmasters. Maybe knockoffs. But this area right here is, I actually measured this. This is 2-inch pipe. And then because it's not a mandrel bend, it necks down to 1.75 inches right here. That ain't gonna cut it for 600 horsepower. And we got 15 different connections there, reducers, double reduced right there. You got 2-inch pipe, 2.5 inch, 2-inch, 2.5 inch. And then, comes up over the axle. Okay, I don't know if this is these are factory pipes right here. It looks like they might be stainless, 409 maybe. But then someone welded I don't know if these are the factory tips or not, but like what's going on with that? So anyways, we got a couple options. We can spend a bunch of time fabricating a custom exhaust. We've done that on the Camaro. We've done it on C6 Corvettes in the past. If you've been on the channel a while, it's definitely a possibility. But I also noticed that those Stainless Works headers that I have, Stainless Works also makes a catback for these cars, and I think they're the only one that does. If you guys know of any other ones for this car, let me know, but man, that might be worth it just to go all the way from way up there, straight out the back and not have to spend a whole weekend fabricating an exhaust. But we'll see. Anyways, you know, the car is super clean. I think we are, like I said, I think we already knew that. But nothing too exciting back here. The only thing I did notice was we have an aftermarket drive shaft of some sort. Dynotech Performance Engineering or something like that. It's definitely aluminum, not magnetic. So that's obviously not factory. I believe this thing has 410s in the rear. What I am curious about is what's up there for a fuel pump. This car was, you know, it had a Vortec on it. So I would assume that's not factory, but look at this fuel tank. It mounts like sideways, like, you know, 90 degrees off of where most fuel tanks would be. So I guess that means we can get to the fuel pump without dropping the tank, which is cool. We'll just have to make sure that the tank is mostly empty, but it's possible the fuel in there is 8 years old, so that's probably good anyways. But yeah, super, super clean car. I am happy with that. Anyways, here's the transmission held up by that 2x4 and a ratchet strap. I think all we need to do to get this out is take this exhaust out, which may or may not be going back on, drop the drive shaft, probably lower the car down, get a jack under here, undo the shift linkage, some connections, and then get this transmission crossmember out. So it's already kind of late tonight, but I might start that process. The other thing I think I'm going to do is probably just take this, just bite the bolt and take the bumper off. I think that's going to give us an extra 6 inches or so, hopefully, to get this engine crane to hopefully stuff this whole package down and in. And before we do that, we need to start considering where I'm going to be cutting on this, you know, to notch the frame to fit around this alternator here. And oh yeah, I made a list. It's an official project now. We got stuff on the list. Build 4.6. That is done. So now we need to do everything else on here. This is what I've thought of so far. Obviously much more I'm sure will come up, but I think the stuff we're going to focus on in this video is this one right here, this one, and this one. And that will be a lot of progress. If we can get the motor in this car, that would be huge. So let's quit blabbing, get to work. Forgot about that. Maybe we'll leave this in for now. God, I'm just wedged in this. Really don't want my foot between these two, but duty calls. Going down. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, just me. Every time you try to not make a mess, it makes a Mess. Can you just not do this right now? Great. I have never in my life pulled an automatic transmission without making a mess. Oh my God, it's still going. Every time. She's out though. Finally, completely blank canvas, empty engine bay. Well, nothing new on this channel. It has been at least 3 weeks since I have touched the Marauder. Went ahead and went to Georgia, bought the wife an SQ7. To replace our SQ5. And I traveled for a few days, then I got absolutely destroyed by sickness for a week. And then I was scrambling to finish the truck video that I started filming before I got sick. So all that means we didn't work on this thing for a little while, but we're back. We are back, and I'm fired up to get this thing in there. So where I left off was I basically got the transmission ready to come out. I pulled the drive shaft, realized it was gonna make a huge mess. So then I went out and bought these like transmission cap things, and that was like 3 weeks ago. But anyways, finally got out here tonight, went to use it. It worked great for a second, and then as soon as I went to drop the transmission, of course it popped out and we had murder she wrote on the floor. And then I got it nice and clean again, and then the transmission line leaked as I was pulling it out. So can't win, but the transmission is out. This is, I believe, a 4R70W or 4R75W. I was looking at this thing here. It looks like it is a May 10th, 2004. So relatively late 04 transmission. I think it's mostly stock. I don't know if this braided line that goes to the tail housing there from here is stock or not. So, I mean, it is held on with a zip tie there, but auto transmission, guys, let me know if that's factory or not. I think this is the factory torque converter. Which I believe for the 04s was a 2800 stall speed. And a bunch of you guys were saying in the previous videos, like, put a converter in it, put a converter in it. And in most cases I would agree, but there's two reasons I don't think I'm gonna do that right now. One, like I said, the 04s I think had a 2800 stall speed, which is pretty good for a street car. And two, actually 3 reasons. Two, this car allegedly, previous owner tells me, has 410 gears in the rear, which is a huge mod that the Marauder guys did to alleviate like a lazy off the line problem. The third thing you can do to alleviate, you know, a lazy off the line problem is double the factory horsepower. So I figure with double the factory horsepower and a 410 rear gear, this thing should be absolutely no slouch off the line. There's a bunch of guys that kind of chimed in on one of the Facebook pages that I wrote into and said, if you got an Eaton on there and any sort of rear gear, the thing's gonna be fine. I'm not gonna be taking this thing to the track every single day. So we'll see. If it sucks, then we'll put a converter in it. But for now, I'm gonna try and make the factory converter work. As you guys saw by the B-roll, the fluid looks brand new. Doesn't smell burnt at all. You know, I obviously checked that before I dumped it all out on the garage floor, but it looks great. Previous owner said the transmission shifted great, so I would expect this thing is ready to roll. I know that there's some guys that say they're weak, but I also know that there's plenty of guys that make a good amount of power on these things and have run like, you know, 10s and 9s in these heavy cars with these transmissions here. So this is a hard piece of the puzzle to get. This is an 8-bolt flex plate that should be able to bolt up to my weird Marauder. I think it's like a 10.5 or 10 7/8 or 7/16 bolt pattern or something like that. So I was able to find this. So I'll let you guys know if that works, but there's the part number. Cross member was a pain to get out, but we got it done. We'll get that thing cleaned up before it goes in. So the reason I pulled that, obviously, is I think as I described in a previous video, I think the easiest way to install all this is going to be to mate up the transmission and the motor and stab them in together. But before I do that, because we're using the Cobra accessory drive, we have got to get a frame notch going for this alternator. So I think what I'm going to do is get this thing off the stand, at which point we can eventually bolt the flex plate and stuff on too. But I really want to focus on this frame notch. This ABS module might be in the way too. We'll have to see about that. But I want to kind of get this thing, drop it in approximately where it's going to go. Might have to unbolt the steering shaft there. And then we can hopefully make some marks and cut out the frame to clearance for our alternator. Then we can get the grinder out, the welder out, some weld through primer, some paint, and hopefully make some room for this massive Terminator long block here. Let's do the thing where we do music montages and work. McLovin voice. She's in.
It's in. God, it's in.
Took 3 tries, but for the first time, our Terminator power plant is inside of our 2004 Mercury Marauder. We are down on both sides. You guys are going to have a hard time seeing that. Maybe if I get a light down there. Both sides, motor mounts are in the K member where they're supposed to be. This is exactly where this thing is going to sit. It is tilted back a little bit because, as we already knew, because of the internet, the alternator on the Cobra drive, the Cobra accessory drive rather, interferes with the driver's side frame rail. So we're going to have to cut a little pocket in this frame rail to get the alternator to clear, get the engine to go down all the way. You know, it's been done many, many times before. Not many, but it's definitely been done a few times before where guys have done the full Terminator swap. But I have not found a single picture of anyone's frame notch. Not one. Like, nobody takes pictures of their stuff. Nobody makes YouTube videos of this kind of thing. I'm kind of in no man's land here as far as this notch, but I think obviously we can see what we need to do. It looks like we're only gonna need to get into it a little bit right here, just make a little pocket, see how far down we have to go. But obviously we wanna make sure that we can get the alternator in and out without removing the motor. Hopefully we never have a problem with this KMJ alternator, but that is a wear item on most motors, and we certainly don't wanna be picking up the motor and tilting it to one side, or, worst case, removing the motor to replace the alternator. That would be bad. So we gotta figure out some sort of notch here, but man, look at this engine. It's finally in. Took 3 tries. First time, ran into a problem with the radiator and fan, so I took that out. Also, guys, is this a Mustang fan? This looks a lot like the Cobra fan that I'm so used to. All the pictures I find online of the Marauder, it has like this massive shroud. So I'm wondering if this is because of the Vortec kit that was on this car. And it looks like they zip tied the, regulator or speed module on there. So I wonder if I need to get that big shroud. But anyways, had to take that off to get the motor in. And then second thing I ran into was the wiper cowl was hitting on my engine thing right here. So quickly remove that, vacuum that out. We obviously got to clean all of that up. But first, let's focus on getting this engine fully in. Oh yeah, also pulled this ABS module up and out of the way and zip tied it out. I'm going to get the frame notch done first, or the frame pocket done first, and then we'll see how this ABS module may or may not fit with no modifications at all. It might be just fine, but we'll see. So months ago at this point, I measured the frame with my calipers. I think it was just about 1/8 of an inch, and I went on McMaster or Granger, I can't even remember. Got an 1/8 inch piece of steel here so that we can box the frame in once we make the pocket and make it just as strong or stronger than it was before. So once we get it all cut out, we'll drag the welder over, we'll get some weld through primer on there, get it all buzzed in with the metal glue gun, and then we'll grind it up, make it look really nice. Primer, satin black paint, hopefully should look somewhat close to factory when all said and done. Did a very similar job on the 69. You won't be able to see it, but down there, I wanted to do a low mount AC on this car because otherwise the AC compressor's up here and all ugly, so you just have to do a little notch on the cross member on the first gen Camaros to get one of those mini AC compressors down there. Can't even tell it has AC, but it does. So, similar process, cut, weld, grind, paint, good to go. So, I think at this point I'm going to make some marks where I need to cut, then I'm going to pull the engine back out, give myself plenty of room to work in there. Let's get this frame notch going. And that sure is a nice frame rail. Be a real shame if someone cut it. All right, quick work with the old death wheel here, and we put a hole in an otherwise mint Marauder frame rail, but the good news is the motor is in, as you guys just saw in the B-roll. The alternator fits perfectly, and as I'm now showing, we can, or have now proved, we can remove the alternator without removing the motor. We are fully down on the motor mounts on both sides. The car is supporting the motor. The engine crane here is really just supporting it from doing this because there's no transmission in it. But we are fully down on both sides. You do have to remove the alternator bracket, which is just 2 more bolts. So if we ever have an alternator issue, it's really, actually, it's probably easier than getting to it on an 03 Cobra. If you guys have ever done it in the car on a Cobra, you know what I'm talking about. Up here, we just undo this bolt. undo that bracket, this thing literally just fell out. So we are good to go there. Although I have noticed another problem. Unless we want to pull the motor every time we do an oil change, that ain't gonna work. So I guess the 03 Cobra oil cooler is out. And oops, as we already noticed, or already showed in this video, the Marauder oil filter adapter is also out because the water neck basically goes right into where the alternator goes. So at this point, I think I'm gonna have to do what I did on my Turbo 04 Cobra back in the day, and that is a remote oil filter setup, which basically, as the name implies, uses AN lines to remove the oil filter wherever you want. So we basically run a much smaller adapter down there, probably run some AN lines, mount it somewhere up here, somewhere easy to get to so that we can easily do oil changes. So let's add that to the parts list. They're usually not cheap, but the good thing is, once again, these 03 and 04 Cobra specific parts are expensive. That oil filter adapter and oil cooler combo, I think, are worth like 400 bucks on eBay. So at least we'll be able to fund our remote filter with that. Anyways, let's get this motor out. Let's do some final grinding. Let's get the welder out. Let's pretend I'm a fabricator for a little bit, fill in this hole in the frame, and get ready to drop this thing in for the final time. Shoo! One last test fit. We are good. Man, this thing looks good in there. All right, let's finish buzzing it in. notch, done. Easy. Got the old Harbor Freight metal glue gun out here, and we have got ourselves a notch. I made some template pieces from an old, what were these, Surfside seltzers or whatever. Just a little arts and crafts project. I made 3 pieces. This one piece that kind of I bent or heated up and bent and folded down to the bottom. And then these 2 side pieces that welded in there. Cut them up, ground them down, did a bunch of test fitting, a bunch of grinding, then tacked them all in. Then I actually used weld-through primer on the back side of all of them, then tacked them in. Of course, did one final fit. We have excellent fitment with our alternator, and then blasted it all together. The perimeter welds came out really, really nice. The interior ones, I've had better. I think I had my helmet settings on a little bit dark, and I was like, that sounds pretty good. I'm just gonna blast through it. Put the helmet up and was like, not the prettiest, but they're structurally sound. The perimeter welds were much better, and you're not gonna see any of that. I mean, the alternator is gonna come down here, and then we still have to get this ABS module, which I probably should have test fit, but that is gonna cover up most of this. So I really don't think we're gonna see any of this, even though I made it look, really nice from here. If you look at it from here, and ignore a little bit of bubblegum welds right there, this almost looks like a factory notch, especially once we paint it, which is the next step. And of course, did some etching primer, a couple coats of etching primer on all the bare metal there. So we should be rust proof here, even though I would expect this car is never going to see another, or actually it's from Louisiana. It's never seen a winter, and it never will see a winter. It's going to be a beautiful low mileage Marauder when we're done with it. Now we have this beautiful Terminator long block and this kind of dirty, neglected, sitting for 8 years engine bay. This frame rail looks like it, we got in a time machine and went back to 2004. This one is very close, but this is where the battery used to sit. Looks like we had, just some like minor paint peeling and stuff. So what I'm getting at is I think it's time to push this car outside, lay into this thing with degreaser, power wash, and get this thing surgically clean. And then while we're in here, we might as well, because we got to paint this anyways, I think let's quickly give this frame rail a quick spritz and get that cleaned up. I've got some tractor paint left over from when we did the completely painted the frame rails on the Lightning last summer. Came out pretty good. It was like a very factory looking OEM satin matte black finish. So that should work well. Only caveat right now is it is currently the 13th Saturday of rain in a row here in New England. So it might get a little wet, but I guess that'll help me rinse the engine bay. And then hopefully once the rain stops around lunchtime, we can fire up the Harbor Freight $9 paint gun, primer gun, and splash some color on those frame rails. All right, let's get to work. Well, good morning. Happy Father's Day to all you dads out there. Yesterday we got a lot done on the old Marauder. We calling it the Marauder or the Maraudinator? Maybe I should start a poll. I kind of like Marauder, but Maraudinator's pretty badass too. Anyways, we got a lot done yesterday. Got both frame rails fully prepped and painted using some leftover Tractor Supply tractor paint from painting the Lightning. And I'm really impressed with how it came out. It looks factory. It looks so perfect. It's got that perfect satin finish. Just a quick scuff with a red Scotch-Brite pad. Quick wipe down and everything was good to go. Of course, we did a full degrease, power wash, clean of the engine bay, and that is now perfectly clean. Looks like it should for a 30,000 mile car. Right now, I'm just taking off the oil filter adapter, 03 Cobra specific, and oil cooler, also 03 Cobra specific. You can kind of see, oops, backwards, how they go together like that. Because as I mentioned, these are no longer going to work for us. So at this point, I think we are just about ready to stab this motor in. Yeah, check out this engine bay now. Much, much cleaner. Of course, we'll give it a final wipe down. The wiper cowl and wiring harness and also the transmission crossmember got a full clean as well. Those are outside drying right now. But yeah, she's ready for the Terminator power plant, which I think at this point, a couple things left to do. Biggest one is we gotta connect the transmission to the motor. Had a bunch of extra paint, so I painted the plate that goes between the transmission and the back of the motor. This is actually that panel that goes under your knees, under the dash. Dug that out of the trunk. Had some extra paint. Also, you know, just gave the torque converter a quick squirt while I had it out. You know, couldn't have a rusty thing sitting in there. Also, you guys saw in the B-roll, this is kind of an interesting problem that I took a long time researching, is the torque converter bolt pattern on the Marauder is like 1 in a million. It's 10 5/8 or 10.625 inches between bolts. And there is not a torque converter flex plate in the world, as far as I know, that fits that with an 8-bolt crank. If you buy a factory Marauder flex plate, it only has 6 bolts for the factory 6-bolt crank. So if you want to use a Cobra forged 8-bolt crank, you got to use some sort of 8-bolt flex plate. This one is from PRW. And basically I just had to remove the smallest bit of material from the torque plate bolt holes, like literally just removing the paint, almost like less than a 1/16 of an inch on all 4 of them. And now it slides into these bolt holes. I've seen other guys do this exact thing for this exact problem on like the Marauder forums and stuff. Seems to be the only option other than going with an aftermarket converter, which not really wanting to do yet at this point, as I've already described. So this should be ready to bolt on. And then I have never ever installed an automatic transmission before. Everything I've ever done in the past has been manual transmission. So we're gonna go through this together, but I think you go through this little window down here and tighten the torque converter bolts once the transmission is fully seated up against the back of the motor, which I just realized I also still need to pull out the pilot bearing, which is where your input shaft for a manual transmission would go, because I think this little nub here has to slide into there. So that's the goal right now. If I can successfully get these two mated, we should be able to hopefully stab this whole thing in at once. We've had the motor in like 5 times now. We'll see if and what I run into, but of course gave the transmission a quick power wash as well. It's looking really good, really clean. So yeah, let's stab these two together and with any luck, get this whole thing in the car. And man, what a huge milestone that would be. Looks great, right? Well, so close, yet so far. So got my pilot bearing out, got the flex plate on there, torqued on with ARP hardware using their special assembly lubricant. Messed around with the transmission to motor as you always do, you know, getting the angle correctly and everything like that. Got everything to slide together with the spacer. Came down here to bolt in the flex plate. And unfortunately, we got a problem. The torque converter bolts do not engage fully through the flex plate. Transmission is fully seated to the back of the block all the way around, which really can only mean one thing, and that is that the flex plate that I have is not right. Maybe it's not spaced out from the crank enough to properly engage those bolts, which is a real bummer because, like I said, I've spent hours researching this flex plate situation, and what it boils down to is that damn Marauder specific 10.625 inch torque converter bolt spacing. There's literally the only flex plate you can get in that bolt spacing is the stock Marauder flex plate, which, as we've discussed, is no good for an 8-bolt crank. So right now I'm kind of at the point where I'm like, do I just bite the bullet and get an aftermarket converter that has the much more common 11.5 inch bolt spacing? Because this right here, even though it looks good, is not going to work, unfortunately. We can't. I tried even though it doesn't look right. I tried to get one of these torque converter bolts started. It would not start. And, you know, we obviously know that that's not right anyways, so it doesn't really matter even if I did. So let me know what you guys think. I mean, I didn't want to spend money on a torque converter knowing that this one is probably good, but if I can't get a flex plate that works, it doesn't really do us much good. So I've been looking at the FTI Street Brawler torque converters, probably 2800 stall, basically the same as stock, but a little bit of a performance bump. Let me know if you guys have used those or have any other recommendations for a converter. Not really how I wanted to end the video. I was hoping that it would be stabbed here in the engine bay, but this is real life. You guys who work on stuff know that, you know, parts problems are a constant struggle when you're doing stuff that is not 100% factory. This is not how this car came from the factory, so we're gonna run into some issues, but we made a ton of progress in this video. If I can get the right flex plate and or torque converter, we know this is gonna go together and should stab right into this engine bay. Frame rails are ready, the engine bay is clean. This thing is ready to go in if we can sort this out. I do need you guys' help on some other stuff here, some other Marauder specific Terminator swap stuff. One being, I think we gotta do some intercooler pump wiring. Where do I pull power for that from? I got all my intercooler pump stuff over there. We'll get to that. I got a heat exchanger up here. The battery is gonna need to move over to here, so I bought a Mustang battery tray, which means I think I need to extend this power wire, or maybe this whole harness gets moved over and then maybe I run a power wire over here. Apparently the Marauder charging system uses like 3 or 4 wires and the Cobra one only uses 2, so I got to figure out the alternator wiring with a Cobra alternator and Marauder wiring harness. The list goes on. We talked about the cooling fan. Do I need to get the correct shroud for that? If you guys have done this exact swap before, comment down below. Let me know. Tips, tricks, stuff you learned, part numbers, anything is helpful. Either way, we will get this thing done. I'm gonna get online right now, spend some money, order something to get this thing right and get it in the car. But for now, thank you guys for watching. I'm gonna go work on the Lightning, maybe something else, but I'm gonna get to work editing this and get it out to you guys. So catch you guys later.